I'm doing all this here because the concepts are the same. And so while we're not doing it in the same format, I'm hoping that as you participate or at least listen today, that you gain some concepts that will be helpful to you for whatever goal, whatever pursuit, whatever it is that you're after next in life, wherever you're going and whatever you're after. So while you're not part of that community, then at least you will have something today to take home to say that makes sense or it doesn't. And I'll ask you later if it does. And so I'm also challenging people to assess their talents, their abilities, their available resources, their skills, what they enjoy, what they hate. Looking at whether you need a team to help you to achieve what it is that you're going after, or if it'll just be a solo run. For instance, this week on Skool, I have a gentleman coming in that I'll interview, and I met him here locally, and he was an engineer for 30 years of his life. But he always had something else gnawing at him, a drive that he wasn't quite sure what it was until the later years, and he assessed that and determined that he wanted to become a pastor. And so that's what he did. And after working for 30 years as an engineer, he wasn't finished yet. And that's kind of the whole kind of theme of my channel here is for those who aren't finished yet, you've got more to do. And so his is a solo thing. He didn't need a team to do that. But again, he did need to clarify in his heart that that's really what he wanted to do and kind of go through the process that we're going through here. So I'm going to interview him on this week. We do a live in the middle of the week each week, and on a Zoom. And so I'll just be interviewing him and asking him to go through that process from his perspective. So again, we've spent this week to be sure that what we are pursuing is that which is deep within. For me, let me give you another example. I met a fellow way back in the last century, Michael Gerber, who wrote a book called The E-Myth. And the E-Myth was for small business people like myself, who his point that he made to us in that book was that you had to work not only in your business, but on your business. And so it was a successful book. But I had sold a business about the time I had read that. And Michael Gerber came back in my life with a second book in about 2007, 2008. And he wrote Awakening the Entrepreneur Within. And that really struck home because I had been writing a book, Pursue the Dream. And so I'm telling you all this to say that all of this has been deep on my heart for a long time. So when I saw what he was doing, and what he offered in his book, and that was to attend the dreaming room with him and another dozen or 2 dozen people in his home in California for a charge of $10,000. I went out and had that time with him. My dream, my idea was to create a platform where others that were pursuing their dream could come together and encourage one another. And I worked on that for a bit. I worked on it that week. We were together, put together some plans, came back to Maryland and started working on it, and found that I didn't have the tech skills. I didn't have what I needed to get it done. It was beyond my ability to do all of that. Maybe if I had a tech team or something like that, maybe possibly we could have done it. So I had to set it aside. But what has happened is that the Skool community is that idea that I had then. And so when I discovered Skool last year, I got onto Skool because that was what I was wanting to do way back then, and am now doing with profound pursuits on Skool. That's my community. And so I'm now able to do that which I wanted to do many, many years ago, It's been on my heart that long. So I'm just sharing that story with you so that you see that it's something that was deep within. Now, I had also shared last week when we were looking at limiting beliefs, those things that are deep within us that keep us from achieving something, that keep us from going to the next place. I had shared the story of my dad and how it had influenced me significantly with his personality, his non-emotional style, and so I'm not going to go back through that again today, but I do want to take it one step further to give you another view of my childhood that affected me in a big way. And it was actually before that experience with my dad. And I want to do that to help you connect with what we have been discussing and what we discussed last time, limiting beliefs. I just want to kind of close that time out before we move into the differentiation between mind and heart versus the head that I mentioned a moment ago. Again, I had shared some of the deep ingrained beliefs that came from my father as a result of his personality and his style. But here's a deeper part of the story. He didn't come into my life until I was 6 years old. And yes, he was my biological dad. So here's what happened. And it was all retrospective. And I never really addressed these matters until late in life. I kind of knew it, but I didn't know it. That is, I didn't look at it. I wasn't willing to be honest with myself and look at what amounted to some pain that occurred back then. And so that has really just occurred in the past few years. So here I was growing up for 6 years in North Carolina with what I thought was an older brother and sister, and really were turned out to be my half-brother and sister. And I thought, but later had to discover that. But here's what has happened. I was in the womb, and I was brought home from the hospital as Ted Hood. And you'll notice that's the name I now use here online. I use that name as my pen name for the 2 books that I've written. And, but it's not my legal name. Jack is my legal name. John, I go by Jack. But I took that name back on for a purpose, and I tell the story in the book that I wrote, Metamorphosis. And so again, all of this is from deep within, is what I'm trying to share with you. But it was only about 8 years ago that I recall this. There was a fight going on between my mother and Jay, who I thought was my dad, but wasn't for those first 6 years. And somehow I remember this from age 3, 4, 5, had to be somewhere in that range, but he pointed over to me and said, "That's not my child." Well, at the moment, it didn't really affect me too much, and I didn't think it ever affected me, and didn't really ever think about it, and never had it on my mind. Excuse me. Until I started doing some work on myself about 8 years ago, and that came out. That memory came out. And what happened not long after that, and again, this part of the story I knew, that part I didn't really know or think about, but didn't really look at this until just 3 or 4 years ago. And that is that because I was hidden, I was not to be known, I was a fake, I was a counterfeit, I was a lie. You see, those were the things that were those limiting beliefs that were within me while in the womb and for the first 6 years of my life. And then here's what happened. My mother, just before the 2nd grade, just at the end of 1st grade, picked me up, put me on a flight, flew me here to Baltimore, Maryland. And that day, my life changed. My brother and sister weren't there anymore. Jay was not there anymore. I had a new house, I was living in a new state. I was given a new name as a junior for my real dad that I was now going to start living with my mom. And, um, and so everything changed. My friendships changed, obviously. The school I went to would be different this coming year. My life changed dramatically and drastically. And all of that had an effect on me in ways that I never really thought about until later in life. That's why I go through this process now, challenging people to look at it younger in life, because the earlier you look at things that have affected you, the better. So it's really why I have authentic old guy now. It's because I had lived my life inauthentically for most of my life, trying to be other people. In business, sold this business, I bought this business, I did this, I did that. But I was kind of templating myself after other people. I saw what other people had done, and I kind of liked that, and I kind of tried to become like them instead of knowing who I am and becoming Ted Hood. Forgive me for this water, but I got a little something in my throat. And so that's why I now have Authentic Old Guy, because it allows me to be myself and to express those things that are really important and make a difference, and challenge people to be who you are. So I tell you this now, so you'll embrace how important it is to know your story and to live it from the heart. You see, all this work that I now do online flows out of my heart from the experiences. It's the heart that motivates and it drives and it encourages us to press on. If it's only in your head, your success may be quite limited. It's a whole new ball game. So that's why I spend this whole first week challenging folks to get in touch with their heart and set aside the head. And again, I'm going to go through a little bit more explanation on that in just a few moments. Now, I'm not saying you cannot set a goal from your head and go after it and achieve it. No, certainly you can do that. We do it day in and day out, really. It's the way we live our lives by and large, setting goals that we think up in our head and plan in our head and put together and go after. And that you can achieve. What I'm referring to here is, I hope you see, when I call it profound pursuit, is the deeper part of that. It's the part that has to do with who you are and the way you've been made and the experiences that you've had and the challenges that have made you who you are. And so it's that profound pursuit, because all of that has affected you and brought you to the place that you are today, wherever that might be. So it's what's impacted you. It's what you want to help others with. It's how you maybe want to give back, especially as you get older, such as myself. That which you enjoy and you live day in and day out. All of that must be from your heart. So we're not talking just about a goal, although many of these concepts can be applied to a goal. But you don't have to dig so deep to just go after a goal, but to go after that thing that has transformed you, that thing that has changed you, that thing that is changing you, that thing has affected you drastically or dramatically. Then that you really have to assess from the heart. That you really have to look at closely and deeply. And so that's what I challenge people to do in profound pursuits. I shared one story with you earlier about the fella of becoming a pastor, and that was kind of a light lift in terms of going after that and pursuing it. I've had someone join just today from India who is looking to build a huge organization. She's had the experience, and she knows what she wants to go after, and so it's an entirely different pursuit. And so we have all kinds of different people there. Some people that just want to do a small business, other people that want to start a charity, And so we've got different people with different desires. And so when you're going after those kinds of pursuits, when you're trying to build something huge, when you're trying to change something completely, when you're trying to uh, move into a whole new realm, then it really needs to be from the heart. And we'll look at that again more in just a moment. But we go through this past week to tell ourselves the truth, to assess the good and the bad areas of our lives, and now place behind the bad and press on towards the new, putting those things behind and pressing on towards the mark of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus is the way the scripture says it. It's towards a new positive realm, towards our strengths and our desires that drive us, assessing our weaknesses and seeing how we maybe need to have other people in our lives to help us with our weaknesses. So that's kind of what we do, and that's why I say we're at a critical point in the 30-day challenge, if that's what you were a part of. And I'm just trying to challenge you to see how important, if you're really going after something big, it is to kind of get in touch with who you are, with what your heart is speaking to you. So let me just stop for a moment. Does it make sense to anyone? Again, the profound pursuits, the 30-day challenge is done on a live Zoom, day in and day out, Tuesday through Friday, and we have interaction as we go. So it's entirely different than what we're doing here, but I can ask, since we have the chat going on, does any of that make sense to you, or is it nuts? And it takes a moment for one to come through, so if something comes through, I'll let you know. So now, let's consider what I've been alluding to, this difference between the mind and the heart versus the head. This was a huge take for me when I went to atlasproject.org, which is where the 30-day challenge has been formulated from. Everything that I'm doing in the 30-day challenge is that which I went through in a 2-long weekend time at atlasproject.org. You can look it up and you can see the process that they go through there. It's an experiential learning time, training time together, live together. I went to Austin, Texas for that. And so the first day, the very first day, and you don't sit at a table and write notes. This is experiential training. And so in the first day, asking certain questions of us, I recall that the instructor said, "That sounds like that's from your head." And so a couple of gentlemen were with me, and weren't too many older guys like me. There's only a handful of us out of about 60 people. And we kind of looked at each other. What's she talking about? From your head? Isn't everything? And you know, just about everything is. And that was her point. And that was the point that we learned that day. That if we're only operating in our head, we're really operating in what we can see and we can touch and we can feel. We're only operating on the basis of the data center that we have here. And that we're not operating from who we are. And so that's kind of the beginning of our time here this afternoon to discuss this differentiation between mind and heart versus the head. I really call the head the brain because it's a part of this body and bones that we have here. And it's wonderfully designed and it does great things for us. But if you think about it, you can kind of go about your day in and day out activity without much thinking, because it kind of takes over for you and does stuff. Whether it's driving a car or riding a bike, you don't think about it anymore. Once you learn it, once it's learned, then it's just almost habitual. And so that's what the head does for you. And so many of the activities that we involve ourselves in are habitual. I've had some addictions in my life, and they drove me because I was just habitually doing things. So that's why it's so important to assess and distinguish between the mind and heart versus the head. And so I'm going to hopefully get you to that today, because we're going after that which is from the heart, this pursuit, this profound pursuit. So so that you have a huge chance at fulfilling that dream, that passion, that hope, that desire of the heart. Whereas if it's just from the head, you have a much lesser chance. Again, if it's just a goal, yep, go after it and do it. But if it's this profound pursuit, this thing that's driving you from within, you have a much lesser chance if it's just something that you've kind of picked up in your head. And so let me give you a couple of examples before I move on for me. First, writing my first book, I'd sold a business way back in the 90s. And so I had a little bit of free time, and I wanted to write a business about being in small business, because by that time I had been for about 15 years, and share some of the challenges that I had so that others wouldn't make those same mistakes. I called it Building a Purposeful Business. And I've just redone that book last summer so that it's now accessible again, because I've updated it for today's changed environment, because the principles are the same. But our business environment today is entirely different, of course. But I wrote that from my heart. That was something I wanted to do. That was something I knew I wanted to do. And it was like the first thing I did after selling the business. And so that was fun. It was challenging. It was a big part of my life for 6 months to a year. And so that's one way of going about something, right? Now, the other example I want to give you is the opposite of that. During that same period of time, I started trading commodities. In other words, I had come to the place where, again, I had to kind of reestablish where I was going next. Again, part of what we look at here, profound pursuits. What's next? And so I was assessing that, and in my head, because I'd read some books and I'd seen some people and I'd understood enough about the trading world that I thought it was something that I wanted to go after. And so I did. And it was all from my head. It wasn't from my heart. And the dismal results of that were the evidence that it wasn't. Because I just had this plan in my head, because it sounded like a good way I could make money. And the way it worked was, I'll just give you the brief story here. The way it worked was, 1 week or 1 month, you do. And the next month, in my case, you can lose it all. You know, if it's part of your being, if it's part of maybe how you were grown up, if it's part of your makeup, because you've maybe been around it all your life and you understand how to control emotions and all that sort of thing. I didn't even know what emotions were way back then. Again, I didn't get in touch with all of that until just before writing Metamorphosis, the transformation that brought me to a revelation about what emotions are and how you deal with them. And so you really need to be in touch with your emotions when you're in that high stakes environment. And so I didn't understand any of that, and I didn't pursue any of that. I just kind of started doing it. You see, it was just from my head. It was just an idea. Oh, wow, you can make money doing this. And you can, maybe. I didn't. And so that's my story, to help you kind of get an idea of the difference. So let's look at it a little bit closer. And before I do, I did put in the post a great video that Michael Knowles does regarding consciousness. Today, quantum physics has apparently really identified the concept of how consciousness is a part of our environment in such a way that we need to be in touch with it. And you see, that's what happened that day that I was sitting in atlasproject.org, and the question was asked, or the statement was made, that sounds like it's from your head. And reckoning that day with the idea that, oh yeah, there's a whole nother part of me. There's this part of me that I'm not seeing and touching and feeling. There's this part of me that's motivating me and driving me. There's this part of me that has been formed by virtue of the fact that I've had experiences in life and circumstances of life that have made me who I am, that I'm not even looking at, that I'm not even thinking about. And I'm just operating from my head. And so Michael Knowles does this great video. So I did put the link to that in the post today, so you can find it there on the site in the post. I challenge you to go take a look at it. It is about an hour long, but really, really interesting about what's being discovered today, and what is I think better communicated so that we can wrap our mind around the idea of what is consciousness, because that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about the mind and the heart. We're talking about knowing who you are, knowing the real you, the essence of what drives you and makes you who you are, and informs so much of what you do. Not just the brain, again, because the brain is on its own. It's on its own track, doing what it does, and it does it quite well. It operates the body, and it keeps you operating in the world in the way that you need to operate in order to get things done. And you can plan there, you can think there about what you need to do next and all that sort of thing. But you can't get in touch with who you are there. That's not who you are. That's just a database that you have there. So listen, remind yourself that there's no average person with regard to who we are. Rather, each of us are very unique, both by design, formed in the womb, and by experience and environment. So again, the questions we're assessing are here to consider going after that big idea, that life-changing, transformational idea. And it needs to be real, from the heart, so that commitment is unquestioned, and so that your passion and your purpose is driving all of that. So it's an intentional direction that you're going because of the deep desire that drives you to succeed in that realm and to complete the task. So the mind and the heart is again, the differentiation is, when we talk about the head, is when we are only really thinking about and doing the things that have to do with the here and the now, and the touch and the see and the feel. And so, yeah, this gets into the spiritual realm, and if you've been here before, you know that that's a big part of my awakening as well, from the emotional awakening to reckon with the fact that I had emotions and how to deal with them. Then the next place that I went was the spiritual awakening and the spiritual growth and transformation. So yeah, a lot of what I cover here does have to do with that. Because we didn't just happen to be here. When you look at all of the magnificence of how the body is made and how it's formed, and all of the circumstances of life and how everything is so interconnected, you've got to know that there's a consciousness that is bringing that about. There is a God that is in the process of affecting so much of what happens in our lives, and connecting with that doesn't just happen in the head. Much of our religious activities kind of keeps it in the head, and so a lot of what I write and do on another YouTube channel, I call it God's Word is on that channel. I write about this whole process of how we do so much within the religiosity that has to do with the head, and trying to figure things out just in the head. And that was not Jesus's perspective at all. Everything that he brought to us had to do with the heart. It had to do with the real you and the real me. When he was sitting at the Sermon on the Mount, and sitting and talking to people, and talking about those who mourn, and those who weep, and those who see God. He's talking about people who are connected, people who are connected with themselves and are looking to God for who he is, and not just trying to figure things out in the head. So it's not that there's no place for the head. It's not that we don't need the head. We do. but we need it mostly for the here and the now and this world and the things that we do and we touch and we feel. But really, all of those things, touch, see, feel, hear, even taste and see that the Lord is good. All of those senses that we have are in order that we can go to the next level and that we can see and know God. So they've been given to us and are useful and are necessary for this world, and that's great. But we've really got them to be able to move to the next level so that we can see and touch and know the living God. And so that's a whole other story. I'm sorry I digress there, but again, I've got this whole other channel, God's Word Is, where I pursue that on a rather in-depth level. So if you have an interest in that, check it out at God's Word Is. I've got one on evil right now that's got about 30-some thousand views because, again, it speaks to these matters that we maybe don't think about too much. Especially if you're in the church or in the mosque or in the synagogue, whatever it might be. But if we're only operating from our head, we're really only living a half of a life. We're really not in touch with what's going on in a world that we don't see physically, but we can see and know in a way that is beyond the here and the now. So, so the mind and the heart is that differentiation, and it is what I challenge folks to do in the Profound Pursuits 30-day challenge, is to get in touch with who you are, get in touch with what's going on in your heart, with those things that have affected you, with those things that have driven you, those things that are affecting you and causing you to see things differently, to maybe want to have a whole new transformation in terms of where you're going from here. And so you want to know why. You want to look at why you want to do that. You want to know that it aligns with your heart, that you're not just making up something like I did with trading commodities in your head, but that you're maybe doing something like I did when I wrote the book, Building a Purposeful Business or Metamorphosis. In each case, I had come to a whole different place at that moment in time. So that's what we challenge people to do. And so, again, were you part of the 30-day challenge, this would be a Friday. You would be going home with certain assignments to do to get you closer to this and to work on all of this. We're not doing all of that here. I'm just giving you the concept, so that I hope you can take it home and at least access something as a result of the time that we've had together today. And then again, Tuesday will be the actual next 30-day challenge meeting, and so that will become next Saturday's time here. And so we will assess with people, did they firm up their goal? Did they firm up their pursuit? Do they now really know what it is that they're going after? And so I hope that that's been something that is in your mind and heart, that you are able to kind of go the next step from here. I'll give it time just to look for any other thoughts here. Debo 1, when did you find out they were your half-siblings? When I was 6, when I was here, my mother tried to explain it, but I didn't really get it. I didn't really understand it until I visited years later back down there when I was about 9 or 10. But again, never really thought about it. So while it was a reality, it just wasn't a question for me. It's just like, well, I guess this is what happens in life. You move from one state to another one day and everything changes. You lose one family and you have a new family. Again, that was kind of the way my mind helped me, my brain helped me to deal with all of that, so that I didn't feel and experience the pain from it. So, any other questions? Any other thoughts? Thank you for that question, Debo. Is it Debo? And I'll wait just a minute, because it does take about a minute for any to come through. And then we'll be closing out unless I see any others. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other thoughts? I hope it's been helpful, and I hope you visit me and stay with me. Do the subscribe, the like, the notifications, comments. Really, if you do comments, I love it. I interact back with you, whether it be just by text or whether it be by a video. So really look forward to that. If you have any comments, any questions, and that's at Authentic Old Guy here or God's Word Is. So please subscribe to each of those and like, and look forward to seeing you next time. Not seeing any other chats come through, so I'm going to close it out. Thanks so much for being here. Look forward to seeing you again.